Amy, if you can start the live stream and recording, please. Thank you.
The live stream is live, Mark.
Thank you for confirming, Amy. Before we start tonight's Scrutiny Committee, can I just remind committee members that, and everyone present, that the meeting's being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. And if a participant wishes to speak, please use the remote raise hand function. If you raise your hand via the remote function and you're not subsequently invited to speak by myself, please could you turn your camera on to indicate that you wish to speak, or place a message in the chat function. When invited to speak by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on, to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. And if this isn't possible for any reason, please bring this to my attention or to a Democratic Services officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. But as already explained, the chat function may be used to highlight any technical difficulties to myself or Democratic Services. Please can I welcome then all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, and anyone else who's watching the live meeting broadcast of the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 17th of September. Moving straight into the agenda and beginning with apologies for absence, do we have any, please?
Yeah, Chair, I've had one through so far from Councillor Penn.
Thank you very much. Any other apologies from anyone else? No. So we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting from the 16th of July. I'll assume that they've been read. Are members happy with them? And if so, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Hooper.
Happy to propose them, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hooper. And a seconder, please. Councillor William. Thank you very much, both. And moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any, please? No, I see no hands. So we'll move straight on to agenda item 4. This is a reference from Cabinet regarding the Rights of Way Improvement Plan. And to take us through this, we're joined by David Hunt, who's the Countryside Access Manager. And I believe, David, you've got a short presentation for us. So it's over to you. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. So showing okay?
Yes, we can see that, David.
Yeah, you can see that. Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Right. Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm David Hunt, the Countryside Access Manager for Public Rights of Way. There's a quick presentation to you now about the ROIP. So what is a ROIP? It's the Rights of Way Improvement Plan. This sets out the authority's intentions for the management of our Rights of Way network. Its purpose is to provide a 10-year plan outlining how the council will manage and improve the network, increase access opportunities, and become a strategic document to help going forward. So the ROIP is one of the prime means by which highway authorities should identify, prioritise and plan for improvements to the PRO network, and in doing so make better provision for the public to enjoy a range of outdoor recreational pursuits. It also serves as a strategic plan, a bidding document, a guide for prioritization of resources and a way of improving engagement and communication. So why do we need a ROIP? This is to ensure that the council fully discharges its statutory duty under the provisions of the CRO Act, which is the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, which is to review and publish a ROIP every 10 years. It outlines how the council proposes to meet its well-being and improvement objectives to maintain, improve and publicise the Rights of Way network. So just a brief overview, the Vale has a prime network, approximately, well actually over 570 kilometres in total. An interesting fact to put this into perspective, if you stretch this out end to end, our entire network distance would reach from here into the Scottish borders. So it's quite a large network altogether. The main categories are shown here, comprising the three most common ways: footpath, bridleways and restricted byways. In addition, there's other various sites and routes that can provide access across the county, such as permissive paths, cycle tracks, country parks, and so on. November 2007, the Vale published its first ROIP to provide a 10-year future plan. As mentioned previously under the CRO Act, local authorities are required to review previous ROIPs and republish every 10 years. Given the legislative changes in the last 10 years and economic challenges, it was expected that authorities would have produced new ROIPs by 2017. However, the intervening disruptions due to staffing issues, resources, and the onset of COVID, it was inevitable that authorities would be delayed in bringing the updates to the publication. So a lot of work has gone into this document, and we're now at the point to finalise the process. It's worth noting that in the Vale, we're ahead of most of our neighbouring local authorities, as far as I'm aware. We're one of the only Welsh authorities in the southwest region to be at this point of publication. So publication of the previous ROIP was subject to guidance back in 2002, which outlined how it should be produced and the stages involved. These included widespread consultation, a review of the relevant strategic documents, a condition assessment of the existing network, and review of the definitive map. The result was the first detailed publicly available assessment of our Rights of Way network. So the review and publication of this new ROIP is subject to current and updated guidance issued back in 2016. Similar to its earlier iteration, this outlines the process to be followed, providing for evaluation, development and publication. So evaluation of the delivery of the previous ROIP, evaluation of the current condition of the network, evaluation of future needs and opportunities.
Sorry, Dave. I've got Councillor Hooper's got his hands up and the chair. Sorry, if he wanted to come in.
All I was saying, the slideshow has stopped on consideration and changes for me, so I can hear David speaking, but there's no change in the slideshow. I don't know whether that's just me or is it the same for others?
No, it stayed on that slide for me as well, Councillor Hooper. So Dave, was there meant to be anything else on this slide? What we're looking at is just the slide that says considerations and changes.
Yeah, if you just bear with me, I'll check. Yeah, there should be something.
Yeah, it's coming up now, Dave.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
We've caught up. Thank you, Dave. Please carry on.
I think it was. Yeah, I missed a click on the mouse. So okay, evaluation, development of a new statement of actions and delivery plans, publication of a draft revision, and consideration of any representations. Basically, the key changes from the previous publication include updating of various legislation and policies as they become available, updating our targets and achievements as work is undertaken. Basic principles of the plan remain the same. However, we have improved some of our aspirations. We've reworded some elements and improved our targets to bring us up to date and make the document current and fit for purpose. The revised draft ROIP was initially consulted with all statutory consultees and the general public back in 2017 by various workshops and drop-in sessions. Responses to the consultation process and discussion with the Local Access Forum, known as the LAF, took place during a workshop in September 2018. Consultations included all stakeholders, public, LAF members, community councils, internal officers, elected members, and so on. This was carried out comprehensively to ensure we discharged our duty to consult, as this is a public document which will direct our resources and priorities for the next 10 years. All representations and resources, all representations and comments received during this period form the basis of this final version. All consultation responses were evaluated and all valid, relevant comments taken on board and adjustments made to accommodate them. As mentioned previously, this process was delayed. However, since I've been in post over the last few years, I've been able to re-establish the process to finalise this document. And we went back out to undertake additional consultations last year, mainly to add as a refresh to the process and update to ensure we were following all the processes through to completion. So I'm just going to summarise a few points from the July Cabinet meeting as a quick reminder, and for those of you that weren't present. The Deputy Leader presented the report on the 11th of July, the purpose of which was to enable the Cabinet to consider and approve this ROIC document. Several members had attended previous LAF meetings where the principles of the
Sorry, Dave.
David,
Apologies.
sorry to interrupt you, David. Yeah, I was going to say you need to do one more click, but we're there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I was preempting you.
So I think it might be just a delay coming through. Okay. Yeah, several elected members had attended the previous meetings where the principles of the ROIP had been discussed. Changes to footpath accessibility had been noted, including wheelchair accessibility, which had a positive impact for local residents and visitors. The leader also stated that another positive aspect was the availability of routes electronically, with the ability to choose which were available and with much improved access to this information. So as the ROIP is now ready to publish, it will become our official document for the next 10 years, taking us up to 2033/35. In that time, hopefully we'll be able to meet and exceed most of our expectations, including the main focus of improvements to accessibility and availability of the network. It's important to mention that having an active ROIP is a requirement for Welsh Government and NRW as part of their grant funding process when we bid for strategic projects each year. So without an active ROIP, authorities can lose 25% of the available funding. So it's an important document for us to have to ensure that we can bid successfully. As our core budget is very low, we are always stretched to deliver, but seeking these additional funding by bidding for these external grants, we've sometimes managed to even double our available budget each year, but obviously this is not guaranteed year on year. It's important to note that we continue to attend joint community footpath forums. There was one set up many years ago, which includes local communities surrounding Lantern Major, Llanmai, Spartan, and so on, which is hosted by Lantern Town Council. This has been generally successful, and we've used this as a basis to expand this opportunity with other areas. We're already in early discussion with Cowbridge and Dinas Powys to set up forums with their respective neighbouring communities. And this ties in with some of the ROIP's vision of communication and collaboration. Another point to note is that we are actively looking to improve accessibility for disabled user groups. We've been able to commission accessibility surveys for a few of our routes in order to assess the difficulties currently encountered and suggest potential improvements that could be made. So we're already actively working to achieve some of our targets that we've identified within this ROIP. So I hope you can see the relevance and importance of this new ROIC document and how it will help shape the future of our Pro network, including funding opportunities to enhance accessibility of the countryside throughout the Vale. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, David, for taking us through that report. Clearly, a lot of work being done and a very big network to be maintaining. So, so please accept our thanks and pass that on to the team. Councillor Hooper, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dave, for the presentation. I've just got a few comments and questions I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more. I noticed in the report there was a reference to a number of the things that need to be done. The actions are considered long-term, which I presume is butting right up to the 2033, 2034 end date. And I'd be interested in your perspective of whether these things are likely to be achieved. Second point, can you go into a little bit more detail about the general public's view when you'd had the stakeholder consultations? I'd be interested in how engaged they were. Do they recognise the benefits of the public rights of way? And the last thing, again, your last point about accessibility. Often we think of accessibility in regards to this to wheelchair users, but I'd be interested in other people who would find rights of way particularly difficult and just how they've been accommodated and your thoughts in there. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Hooper. David, are you able to respond to those points at this point?
Yeah, I can say a little bit about the accessibility in terms of the public consultation. That was done a fair while back before my time, so I can certainly find that out and pass that on at a later date. That's not a problem. But yeah, in terms of the accessibility, that was a fairly recent survey that we had done by an external consultant. That was quite interesting. There was a couple of especially adapted sort of wheelchairs that they had. Yeah, it was looking at obviously not just the terrain and the ground conditions, but also barriers, such as stiles and gates, that sort of thing, which is even able-bodied people can struggle with those sometimes. So yeah, it was quite interesting. I'd be happy to put together a little summary of the findings and some of the improvement opportunities that we've got, and I can hand those across at some point.
That would be really helpful. Thank you very much, David. I'm sure the committee would be very interested in receiving that. Councillor William, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to reiterate that the issue of disabled access is extremely important. I'm really glad that, firstly, Councillor Hooper raised in that David is looking into this, because even in comparatively easy access areas, such as, for example, on Nell's Point, the coastal path there is very difficult if you're in a wheelchair. And I think an all-round audit, if you like, of what is accessible where for disabled users would be brilliant. But the issue I was going to raise, and I must ask Chair whether she thinks this is actually even suitable to raise. It was related to page 15, and I don't know if this is the place to raise it, but on page 15 is very interesting because it denotes from the Cwmkiddy pub down to Porthkerry as a footpath. Now, I remember the late Councillor Phil Clark convincingly many years ago, before he even got elected, that it was in fact an ancient bridleway, and there was evidence to prove this because of milk floats and things going down. I'm not here to argue the rights and wrongs of it, but I'm interested either if somebody's got the answer now, and maybe to discuss it some other time, as to whether it is indeed a footpath or a bridleway, because I think there's an awful lot of people that would be interested in knowing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the point, Councillor William. I suspect that might be something that needs to be dealt with away from committee. But David, do you want to just come back in on that specific issue?
Yeah, sure. We've got a GIS mapping system which lists all the categories and statuses. So yeah, we'd be happy to look at that and have a look at some of the history for you. And feel free to get in touch directly after the meeting, and yeah, we can give you that information.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
No, that's fine. Councillor Norman, did you want to come in on this issue?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for a very interesting report. Excuse me. We have several access points in Llantwit, making access to a beautifully new setup play park, which people can't access with buggies because it's got the only way to get in from either end is through a kissing gate. And obviously, if you know anything about these kissing gates, there's no way you can get a buggy through there. It's the same with wheelchair access to what is the football club. Is there any plans or any finances available to alter these setups so people can access them? I say we've got a beautiful new playground which people with buggies cannot access on the Windmill Lane. And I was wondering if you have any chance throughout the Vale. I know of just these two in Llantwit. There must be many, many throughout the Vale when these kissing gates were put in, obviously for a very good reason. But I mean, now they're just not suitable for today's way of living.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Norman. You raise a really important point. And sorry, I'm back. Thank you, Councillor Norman. You raise a really important point. And David, if I can add to that, what's the best way for members of the public to raise these issues with the council? Because obviously the report makes clear that acknowledges there are some areas, as Councillor Norman has described, where access is difficult for some members of the public. There are other areas where paths are obstructed or become obstructed because of adverse weather, etc. So what's the route for members of the public and elected members to raise those issues with the council so that they're on our radar and they're added to the list of things that need to be addressed? Thank you.
Yeah, we've got there's one or two generic email addresses that we have that go to the team. There's a maintenance one and a public footpath email address. Most of the time, the public will come in via C1V, or if they've dealt with us before, they'll come direct. But yeah, we welcome issues direct from councillors. It's always good to get that direct contact and discussions going. We do obviously have a cutting contract, and we have a maintenance officer that goes around as and when we can. But I say we are a very, very small team, so we do what we can when we've got the resources. It's worth noting that you say about kissing gates and accessibility that we do look to improve these and we, get rid of any restrictions. But ultimately, it's not just a cost thing. It's actually down to the agreement of the landowner, because we don't own any of the land. It's just a right across it. So ultimately, landowners have the final say, and they are also responsible for ongoing future maintenance of these structures. A lot of them we work with are quite happy to improve styles or gates and improve them to increase accessibility. Some of them aren't. A lot of them are historical boundaries. Sometimes they're not willing to do that if they have issues with stock control. But the majority of the ones we work with are willing to improve that. Obviously, the best solution for us is not to have a gate or a barrier, just to have a gap. But like I say, depending on boundary issues or stock, it's not always possible.
Is that all right, Councillor Norman? Did you want to come back in?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the two I'm referring to are actually on Vale Glamorgan land. They're actually owned by the Vale. Thank you.
Can I suggest that you, David, is the best way forward for Councillor Norman and indeed any other elected members to email you with any specific issues, particularly where those arise on Vale of Glamorgan lands, so that they can be looked at?
Yeah, by all means, yeah, we welcome that. send them across to the team, and we'll take a look at them and
Great.
respond as soon as we can.
Thank you very much, David. Councillor
you.
William, thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor William, your hand is up. Is that a legacy hand, or did you want to come back in? Councillor William has gone. Councillor Prothero, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question really to do with the maintenance of these routes and bridleways, and as I've seen from the report, we look at priority routes and we have an annual cutting exercise on priority routes. So my question is, what constitutes a priority route? The kind of things that I get from my residents are, we can't use the route because it's blocked, because it's overgrown, and the same with our bridleways. Wet, warm weather just promotes growing. So I understand this is a very difficult thing to maintain. So it's just really a question of, are some of these rural routes considered priority routes? Thank you, David.
Thank you, Councillor. David, would you like to respond to that? Thank you.
Yeah, we'd be happy to share with you after the meeting, but there is, obviously we've got the main network. There's a selection of what promoted routes, as in like the Vale trails, that promoted routes that have leaflets and walks that are detailed for visitors. So we've got a list of those, and because they're promoted on the Visit the Vale website and things like that, so they tend to get the priority that way because it's more sort of tourist orientated as well. But yeah, so we've got annual cutbacks that we do. We do get some funding from NRW for cutting back on the Wales Coast Path because that's one of their initiatives. So we are given some extra funding to help with that. But again, another thing to note is that, like you say, with the weather, it's not always reasonable to cut at certain times of the year, because obviously you've got to be aware of the biodiversity issues, nesting birds, for example, in hedgerows and trees. So, you know, they can only be done at certain times that are suitable. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to share the promoted routes and any priority ratings with you. That's fine.
Thank you, David. That sounds really helpful. I can see the Cabinet member has joined us. Councillor Wilson, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want some clarification here, because I know some of the public will be watching this as well as obviously members of the council. And it is rather complicated in some respects, because we're talking about land. Now, some of the land we're talking about is private land, some which we can use. Some of the land is council-owned land as well, which is in the countryside, which is examples would be things like Cosmiston, for example, Porthcary would be under the countryside department, which is responsibility of Cabinet Member Bronwyn Brooks. But if we talk about urban parks, that's basically mine responsibility. So really, you know, it really depends. And if you're not sure, please email both of us, and I'm sure we can provide an answer. But the other thing is, council should also have access to the GIS system. And I think perhaps maybe that's an opportunity, Chair, that we can look for possible recommendation to look into, so there's some training on GIS, because a lot of us do have land queries, yet we often refer it to officers. And I just think if we can find out ourselves, that saves officers looking up, and then we can take it on and look to do it ourselves rather than get them involved, especially at an early stage. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any final questions or comments from anyone before I sum up? No. So thank you again, David, for taking us through that report as anticipated. Lots of interest, lots of questions. I don't think we've got any recommendations to go back to Cabinet, but if I may just summarise a number of what I would consider to be operational recommendations. So there is one around, as Councillor Wilson has just indicated, considering training for elected members in use of GIS so that we're able to address queries direct. If I may also just suggest a recommendation around accessibility. So now that we've actually got this report, I had a look at the council's website, and it's not terribly easy to be able to access information about rights of way. So now that we've actually are moving towards finalising the report, I wonder if consideration could be given to giving this a bit more prominence on the council's website. So we've got a very helpful section that says how to report potholes, for example. And it might also be useful to have a section on how to report rights of way issues or obstructions. I don't know what the wording might be to that. And then following on from Councillor Hooper's issue around consultation with a variety of interest groups, I wonder whether it would also be useful for any future consultation and engagement to specifically engage elected member champions, because obviously they are representing specific groups within the Vale, and they carry a degree of knowledge and expertise that might be useful for any future work. And finally, if I may, I'd like to recommend that we add this to committee's forward work programme and receive a report on progress perhaps in a year. It feels like this might be a longer term reporting issue, just so that we can understand how the implementation of the plan is looking 12 months from now. So if those recommendations are acceptable to committee, I'd like to move those recommendations. Would anybody like to second them? Councillor Hooper?
Just to second them, Chair.
Many thanks. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. And if you're happy to also second the recommendations, so I would move the report for committee to notes, since there are no recommendations to go back to Cabinet.
Happy to do
Thank
so.
you very much, Councillor Hooper. Excellent. Thank you, David. You're very welcome to stay online with us if you want to this evening, but otherwise please accept our thanks. As I've already said, pass our thanks back to your team who are working so hard on this important issue. And if you want to leave to enjoy the rest of your evening, please feel free to do so.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we move on now to agenda item 5. This is another reference from Cabinet concerning the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council Annual Self-Assessment 2023-24. To take us through this, we have Marcus Goldsworthy and Miles Punter, the Directors of Place and Environment and Housing Services, respectively. They'll be taking us through the report in sections, so there'll be an opportunity to ask questions in between. And welcome, Marcus, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we have actually got a presentation which, if you like, I will run through the presentation. And obviously, if members have got any questions they want to ask during the presentation, please do so. Or alternatively, they can ask questions at the end of the presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I will just try and share the...
Thank you. I was going to suggest that we hold our questions till the end in that case, unless there are any burning issues. But thank you.
Chair, if I may, sorry to interrupt, but could I ask David Hunt to stop his previous screen share, please?
Is that okay now, Amy?
Just bear with me one moment, Chair. I'm unable to authorise Marcus's screen share because David has not stopped his. It's from the screen share in the top left-hand side of your screen, David. Thank you very much. So I'm ready to accept Marcus's now. Thank you, Chair.
Good to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Amy. Sorry.
That's
I'm hoping
fine.
this is the right work and this is working.
Yes, we
Yeah,
can see now, Marcus. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the draft Bevan Morgan annual self-assessment. What I'm going to try and do is run through the various stages of the self-assessment, how we've got here and what's going to happen afterwards, after this meeting. And as you suggested, Chair, if we can have questions at the end, that will be fine. I'll just make sure it's moving on. Here we go. So hopefully that's moved on for everyone else.
Yeah, it has,
the
Marcus.
annual self-assessment. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. The annual self-assessment obviously is about embedding a culture of evidence-based and outcome-focused performance, self-reflection and challenge to ensure continuous improvement. To meet our performance requirements annually, we will come to a judgment and report how well the council is doing around exercising its functions effectively, using its resources economically and efficiently and effectively. Are we providing value for money, governing itself and how we run, and identifying what we can do and how we can do it better. The annual self-assessment report reevaluates the council's progress in meeting its 23-24 annual delivery plan commitments and corporate plan wellbeing objectives. It aims to identify areas for improving internal processes and resource uses. It is required under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, and we must report performance annually and publish the self-assessment report. The assessment method, the report draws on performance data, including directorate self-assessments, peer challenges, and the annual governance statement. It assesses resource use and achievement of corporate plan objectives. In respect of our actual performance this year, or last year, I should say, 23-24, the overall judgment is good against the annual delivery plan for 23-24. The council has achieved 85% of its 591 planned activities and associated targets, set in what was considered to be an ambitious annual delivery plan, particularly given the context of ongoing significant demand pressures and difficult financial and economic climate. The areas of underperformance have been identified from performance monitoring and remain areas of focus in the current year, and are reflected in the council's annual delivery plan and service level plans for the period. Use of resources. So just to say, obviously, that's the overall view of the plan. Then I'm going to break down and go through each of the sections which deals with, so starting with use of resources, then governance, risk, and internal effectiveness. So in terms of use of resources, our overall judgment is good for how we are using resources, including people, assets, finance, procurement and commissioning, engagement, insight, performance and risk management, and this is informed by the directorate self-assessments. Across our services, we have good evidence of how we have used our resources economically, efficiently, effectively, and equitably to enhance performance, achieve outcomes, and meet the needs of and we are in a strong position to secure future service improvements. A judgment of fair was attributed to the council's finance, commissioning, and procurement to reflect ongoing demand pressures in service areas and subsequent impact on budget. Whilst returning a break-even position in 23-24 budget, this was achieved after a drawdown on reserves to meet significant demand pressures in a number of service areas, which of course is not sustainable in the long term. And a judgment of fair was also attributed to our use of engagement insights, reflecting the need to embed existing pockets of good practice across all council services, and the council's commitment to take forward learning from the findings of the Life in the Vale survey 2023. Governance, risk management, internal control effectiveness. The annual governance statement for 23-24 provides a judgment of reasonable assurance from the head of internal audit. There is reasonable assurance that there are no major weaknesses in our risk management, governance, and control of processes based on review, assessment, and ongoing monitoring. an internal audit opinion of either substantial or reasonable assurance has been given to 82% of risk-based reviews undertaken in the year, testing the effectiveness of the internal control environment, with 92% of all recommendations issued being in the low to medium priority categories. So that term, reasonable assurance, doesn't sound particularly inspiring, but that is the term, that is the if you like, audit term that is given to meeting our requirements. So it is a good term to have achieved. At this point, I've just put in a couple of slides just to show councillors and members of the scrutiny where our money comes from, how we spend it, and what that equates to in financial values for your average council taxpayer. So as you can see here, 31% of our funding is from council tax, so it's literally only 31%. 54, nearly 55% is from the revenue support grant from Welsh Government via the UK Government, and the UK Government via the Welsh Government, and the last 14.53% is redistributed business rates that go to Welsh Government and then are distributed back to us. And our total revenue budget for 23-24 was 294.422 million. In terms of how we spent that budget and where the money goes, it's really important to note that 44% of the budget goes on education and schools, about 30% social care and social services, 13% on general corporate support for the council, 11% on environment and housing, and 2% on planning, economy and regeneration. So if you look at that figure overall, education and schools represent 74% of the, education, schools and social care represent 74% of the total spend of the council. And this last slide on the budget just shows you from an average Band D property who paid £1,464 for their council tax, how much of that is spent on each of the various services that you can see there in front of you. So from that £1,400 or nearly £1,500, £602 is spent on education and schools, £432 is spent on social care. The items go down in value. You can see actually the next item is the £47 on bins and recycling. I think people will be surprised to know that £38 goes on the fire service and payments to the National Park Service. There are a number of items there which people will be surprised at, but essentially that does break down what that £1,464 is actually spent on in quite clear terms. So running our buildings costs £10.58, and planning and building control overall costs £5.22 out of the nearly £1,500 of spend. Moving forward, it's worth pointing out where we are with the current annual self-assessment and what will happen beyond this point. We're currently, the Cabinet considered the annual self-assessment, the draft annual self-assessment on the 5th of September. It was reported to all scrutiny committees, and obviously we're currently on the 17th. There's obviously one report left on the 18th of September. The draft annual report will be considered by the Governance and Audit Committee on the 23rd of September. And then the final draft self-assessment report post-consultation will be presented to Cabinet on the 10th of October. The final draft self-assessment report will be considered by Governance and Audit Committee for approval on the 21st of September, and then to the final draft assessment presented to Cabinet on the 7th of November 24. And it will be considered by full council on the 2nd of December 24. And the findings, the annual self-assessment findings, inform the development of the new corporate plan and the annual delivery statement and associated plans for 25-26. So as you can see, there's been a process that's been involved in reporting this to the various scrutinies and then back to Cabinet and then on to Council for final agreement. And Cabinet has asked to review and endorse the final draft report and refer it back to Governance and Audit Committee and Scrutiny Committees for feedback and consider recommendations before the final approval by full Council. Just a really quick snapshot against the annual delivery plan performance. You can see some of the how we've reached that position of green. In terms of actions, you'll notice that we essentially have a RAG ratings of green against all of them. In terms of performance measures, we have a RAG rating of red against one and amber against the other four. And that has led to an overall RAG rating of amber in respect of performance measures. And in the combined actions and measures, overall, we are looking at a objective one achieving an amber status, with the rest achieving green with an overall rating of green. And if you look at the figures there, as we've said before, there are 591 actual service plan actions and performance measures, of which 502 or 85% are green, 12 or 2% are amber, and 77 or 13% are red. This table breaks down the various judgments against how we've used our resources to deliver our annual development plan and commitments, and does that looking at the overall on the top here, the different departments of the council, and this first table is what each department reported to as its views on how it had performed. The second table is the post-moderation judgment. So we go through a process as directors where our views are moderated against a panel review. And you'll notice that in some cases those goods have changed to fair, and in some cases I think a fair has changed to a good. Looking down the table, particularly with the two areas that mostly respond to this committee, environment and housing and place, in most cases they stayed the same. The one area where it was changed from the original pre-moderation judgment was in respect of place, and that related to engagement and insight, and that related back to some of the issues we've had around doing our placemaking work and some of the consultation exercises falling a little behind, and it was felt on moderation that a fair was a fairer judgment of where we got to on there. But you'll notice that in terms of environment and housing, the judgments are as the pre-moderation suggestions. And overall, looking at the final table, this is the final judgments in respect of the direction of travel, and you'll notice that there are overall a couple of fairs out of the majority, but the view was that we are achieving good in terms of how we are performing. And it acknowledges the existence of good foundations with pockets of good practice, and where necessary, the need to build upon consistency in terms of how we engage and use insight across the council. The overall rating for finance, commissioning and procurement has been revised from good to fair in recognition of the significant ongoing financial pressures facing all council services, and this has been exacerbated by increased demand for some services and other external factors beyond the council's control. On overall, the governance, risk management and internal control of effectiveness has been assessed by our internal audit. Internal audit opinion gives a reasonable assurance of the council's governance, risk management and internal control arrangements for the period 23 to 24, indicating that from a governance perspective, the council's systems and processes are generally sound. The governance statement is an opinion of reasonable assurance can be given to the council's governance arrangements based both on internal audit and in accordance with the SIPA and SOLIS governance framework. And the view is that the annual The annual internal audit opinion is that we've achieved a reasonable assurance to the council's framework, which, as I say, is actually a really good assessment in terms of how we've achieved our governance, risk management, and internal controls based on audit opinion. This slide deals with some of the emerging areas that we're going to focus on council-wide in the next year. And you'll look, I'll pick through some of these quite quickly. Some of them are things like addressing our ongoing workforce and recruitment and retention challenges. These issues come up quite often in some of our scrutiny committees. Development and retention of key skill sets requires to deliver our reshaping programme and major council projects. Increasing workforce diversity and promoting a culture of inclusivity. Strengthen our workforce planning work within the context of our ongoing budgetary pressures. Working collaboratively to identify areas across the council which can be put to better use. Assets, I should say, across the council, not areas. Identifying assets which can be put to better use. Working collaboratively to identify capital improvement and development projects for social care to grow services in line with market stability report. Developing our digital services, applying new planning policy to reduce carbon output, supporting development of whole authority transformation strategy that supports longer-term financial stability of education provision and our schools, maximising opportunities to access and use grant funding across council services with partners to address local issues and deliver sustainable, impactful services. Working collaboratively to seek extension of the Shared Prosperity Fund programme to ensure continued support for major regeneration projects, and implementing the Audit Wales recommendation associated with local reviews. We are streamlining and reinvigorating the performance of the democratic scrutiny process following the development of a new corporate plan, embedding placemaking across the council, supporting and challenging schools to raise levels of attendance with emphasis on the secondary sector, reducing the overall rate of young people not in employment, education and training, working collaboratively to refine target groups to support employability, and widening access to public arts on a cost-neutral basis. We're leading and supporting the delivery of new homes across the Vale of Glamorgan to respond to the growing housing and homelessness pressures, supporting the delivery of net zero ambitions through recycling services and management of our fleet vehicles, and working with partners to promote community models of care and minimise any unnecessary time spent in hospital. And developing our oversight engagement activities across the councils to strengthen insight and promote and inform decision making and communicating what has changed as a result. We are also improving our responses and learning from complaints. And there we are, that's the end of that, so I shall stop sharing the screen.
Thank you very much.
Happy to take any questions around that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for taking us through that. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Chair. A couple of just points of clarity that may help the members on this call as well. So we've used good and fair. Can you maybe, when you answer the question, just say, what were the other terms that were available? Was it just good or fair? Was there poor? Just so we can understand what the balance is. The second point and is a wider point, and I think that this looks like this self-assessment seems to be a bit more balanced than the previous ones were, which has concerned me when I've looked at this in past times. But there still is, I think this is still a very political document. So one thing that we're missing is a member of the cabinet presenting it. We're always giving it to officials to present it. So I'm looking forward at governance and order, and perhaps I'll bring it up with the chair ahead of it, that we have the council cabinet members present this document rather than putting officials up there, because it's obviously an assessment, a self-assessment rather than something that somebody else has done. And the last point, I'm just keen to understand how this compares, because there doesn't seem to be a comparison in the document to previous self-assessments, because one of the things we need to do is be able to reference progress or not between years. So I welcome your view on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hooper. Marcus, there's absolutely no expectation that you would respond to the suggestion that this is a political document that should be presented by elected members. And Councillor Hooper, I think you're right. I think governance and audit is a more appropriate committee for that point if you wish to make it. But it would be really helpful, Marcus, if you could clarify, as Councillor Hooper has requested, what other outcomes were available to us other than good or fair, and how that was achieved. And just to say, as the chair of this committee, I took part in the challenge process that considered performance over the last year, and I've never been part of that process before, and it struck me as a very open, honest, transparent process. There was a very thorough, robust debate, certainly lots of views around the table. So I was encouraged that it felt like a very robust process to me, but do please explain the other options that were available in terms of outcomes. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. I have to say, I'm so used to using the RAG rating of, I think it's poor, but I will have to come back on that to Councillor Hooper and advise him, unless Miles, who's on the call, knows what the actual term is. Unfortunately, I've got 3 screens open on, and I don't want to leave the one I've got open because I want to answer Councillor Hooper's next question. So unless Miles knows it, do you know it, Miles?
Yeah, Chair, excellent, good, fair and poor. And there's quite a narrative in respect to those headings. So if committee so wish, we can send that narrative around so you've got the full detail of how we judge ourselves against those classifications.
That would be really helpful. Thank you, Miles. And did you want to come in on one of the other points raised by Councillor Hooper, Marcus? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Miles, for making sure I didn't put my foot in my mouth. So that's good. Yes, I wasn't sure whether it was poor or not. But if I can share my screen just for Councillor Hooper's benefit, that in the slides there was a very quick assessment of how we performed against the previous snapshot. So if I just share the screen now again, just so I can run through that again. Okay. Hopefully, everyone can see that.
We can, thank you.
Thank you. Apologies, it's a bit smaller than it was, but if members can see that what you have is a direction of travel next to the RAG rating in respect of each of the objectives. So the ADP actions, annual delivery plan actions, the annual delivery plan performance measures, and then the combined actions and performance measures. Obviously, this is very high level. It doesn't go into quite as much detail, perhaps, as Councillor Hooper maybe is thinking about, but it does show you that in respect of the actual actions, we've largely stayed the same. They're green. We haven't changed. In respect of performance measures, the objective 1 performance measures have dropped to red, and therefore the direction of travel there, if you compare that to the previous plan, is down. With the other figures staying amber and staying the same as previously. And then obviously overall, the combination of actions and measures, you'll notice that that is downward as well in respect of objective 1. It stays the same in the others. It's quite a high level of comparison, but it does give you a comparison that in respect of the previous plan, we have, if you like, we have gone the wrong way in respect of objective 1, particularly in respect of performance measures. So hopefully that helps. Stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Did you want to come back in, Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Marcus. That is useful. Just a point then, perhaps that could be clearer, because I did watch your presentation and I didn't know that that was referencing year on year. So I think that would be helpful, because one of the things that we've picked up previously is that this needs to be a document that we want the general public to feel is accessible. And for something to be accessible, you can't question what this thing means. So something to be a little bit clear on that would be helpful. But thank you for that. And thank you for the answer, Marcus. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Hooper, can I just check with you? Is there a specific recommendation arising from that comment? I just want to make sure we don't lose that point about improving accessibility.
Well, maybe it's just that, Chair, that we ask, as this is, because we're still in progress here, so we're not at the end of the thing, but during this, if memory serves me right, at this committee and also at governance and audit, the point I consistently made is this is an inaccessible document. And we don't want it to be an inaccessible document. So one of the things that was suggested is there's a summary that makes it very accessible. Perhaps that's the answer and the recommendation. But at the moment, and this slide that Marcus just put up is a good example of something that it's not clear that that was what was being said then. Otherwise, I wouldn't have made the comment that I made. Had I been clear, I would have understood it. So if I'd request that things are made straightforward, easy to understand, and therefore useful to people.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Councillor Hooper. So Marcus, that leads us to a question around how will this be presented to the public when it's finalised? Obviously, it has to go through governance and audit, and then it will come before full council. And what will the plan be in terms of communicating it to the public? Because as Councillor Hooper rightly points out, it's a very large document.
The intention, thank you, Chair. The intention will always be to provide a summary document, but I think it's a very sensible comment by Councillor Hooper around that. You'll notice that there are some infographic sections that have been used, and I've taken in the presentation and used from the report. And I know the intention is to, in the summary document, to actually use a lot of the infographics so that it becomes clearer to the public, what the report is actually saying, and also how it compares to previous years. Because, I think it's really good point Councillor Hooper's made. I think we can probably strengthen that as a committee if we wanted to go back to say, we're clear, we'd like a very clear, concise summary to be presented, which could, is accessible to someone who doesn't want to read through, obviously, 78 pages or whatever it is of the document itself. And also the use, personally, my view is the use of the infographics is really helpful. For example, that one around finance and on the couple that were put in there about finance, that really draws the public's, it educates the public in particular around how money is spent, but it also draws their attention to how well or how badly we're doing in particular areas. So I think I think the intention is to do that, but I think it's a very well made point, and I don't think it would hurt at all if the committee wants to make that recommendation back.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Can I just check, are there any final questions or comments from anyone else in relation to this? Otherwise, I'll take us to the recommendations. No, I don't see any hands. So thank you very much, Marcus, for taking us through that. And as we've just discussed, the proposal is that this committee sends a recommendation back which says that a clear and concise summary should be made available to members of the public to maximise accessibility once the report has been finalised by full council. And if I may, I would add to that to say, in terms of the final report, I also think it would be useful the next time there is a broader consultation with members of the public for us to be asking specific questions around whether or not they find reports like this accessible, or whether there's anything else that we can do to improve accessibility. And I would move that recommendation if committee is happy. Councillor Hooper.
Can I perhaps just add to that last point you made, Chair? And I think we should also reference those people. So if we just ask the general public that sort of question, we may miss those people who have accessibility problems to start off with. So perhaps we should go to audiences who find this difficult. So those people who may find looking at written words difficult. So how do you make those infographics more useful? So I think I just tighten that last bit up, and then I think I'd be happy to support that recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hooper. So the recommendation, let me just, I'm not sure we'll get the wording exactly right tonight, but the recommendation is that once the report is finalised by full council, then a clear and concise summary should be produced. That's the first part of the recommendation. And the second part is that when we are consulting with the public, the next time we go out and talk to them about communication and engagement, we ask specific questions, both of the general public and of specific interest groups, special interest groups, about our communication and whether there is anything that we can do to improve accessibility, particularly for anyone who will find, for example, written reports difficult to engage with. And you're happy to second that recommendation. Can I just check with officers, Mark, are you happy? Have you captured that recommendation? Because I'm conscious it's quite a wordy one.
No, I believe so, Chair. Obviously, once we get the recommendations out in terms of decision notice and the minutes, I'll confer with yourselves as well to make sure you're happy with that wording. But yeah, I've captured the essence of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And other than that, I move we note the report, and can I have a seconder to that if the committee is happy? Councillor Hooper. We are doing a double act tonight, Councillor Hooper, and I'm very grateful. Thank you. So I'm going to move us on then to agenda item number 6. This is the annual delivery plan. Oh, I should check first of all. Marcus, are you staying with us for this item? Of course, you're very welcome to. I believe you are. But if you want to leave, please feel free.
I am,
to.
yes.
You are. Good, good. Thank you. I thought you probably were. So moving on to agenda item 6, this is the annual delivery plan monitoring report Q1, and this relates to performance in the current year 24-25. Marcus Goldsworthy and Miles Penter will be joining to present the report. So over to you, Marcus. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and I will run through the report, and obviously, if there are any questions for either my area or Miles's area, we're here to answer those questions. And just to add, while we were engaged as well in the previous report, Miles has very kindly put in the criteria for assessing the various standards. So we will get Mark to circulate that to all members of the committee, so they're aware. That's in relation, obviously, to the poor, fair and excellent performance figures of the last report. So sorry to confuse that, but just thought I'd add that in there as Miles has managed to find it and circulate.
Yeah, I'll share that after the meeting, Marcus. Thanks for that, and thanks, Miles.
Thank you. So this is the first report, the first quarter of our annual delivery plan monitoring report for the new annual delivery plan 24-25. It goes from 1st of April to 30th of June this year. One thing to note, and members may have noted this, is that due to current capacity issues within our corporate strategy and insight team, the report is, and the presentation which comes with it is slightly different, in as much as we used to have, or we previously have had the red and amber items highlighted, and unfortunately, due to pressures, that hasn't happened. I can advise committee members, I have picked out, there aren't very many of them as far as I can tell, and I have gone through and tried to pick them out. And if anyone wants to know what they are, I can, I think, give them to you. But as I say, I think there's only 4 of them in the first instance. They're not issues which members will be surprised are on there. There are some of the issues we've had for a while. But to just go through the report, the presentation attached to Appendix A provides a summary of progress against the delivery plan. And we're asking for your consideration as members. So if members are happy, I will pull up the report. I know it's attached to Appendix A, but I will present it on the share screen so that members can see it and we can talk it through. So if I just share my screen. Hopefully we can see that.
We can. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes. So the first slide beyond the page is what we've achieved. And what I'll do again is I won't run through these in their entirety. Obviously, members, you've had these, you can look through it if you've got any questions. But what I'll try and do is just pick a couple of salient points out through each of them. And if you've got any questions on any of the others, what I'll do is I shall stop at the end of what we've achieved and ask if you've got any questions on each of these various sections as we go through them. But as I say, I'll just pick a couple of items out to go through. We're starting at the first one, Objective 1, working with and for our communities. We've got funding and agreement in place to take forward the development of a new extra care facility in Penarth. We've worked to progress a youth hub for learners most at risk and living in deprivation. YMCA is being used by multiple partners as a central hub in the Barry area. Directorate self-assessments have been completed, peer challenged and moderated, and emerging findings forming an overall judgment on how well the council delivered against the previous annual delivery plan. We have shared vaccination promotion material on MMR vaccine walk-in clinics and HPV vaccine via our social media. And following a review of income and recovery processes, several initiatives are underway. A new debt recovery process has been signed off by our Section 151 officer, and following a review by the management team of the council. And this payment strategy work is progressing, and there will be further developments through the income stream on the reshaping programme. So in terms of, I don't know if anyone's got any questions around Objective 1 and what we've achieved. If not, I'll move on to Objective 2.
Yeah, I see no hands, Marcus, so please do move on.
Thank you, Chair. So Objective 2, supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth. We just picking through this, the social value clauses continue to be used as a standard in council contracts, including house building, sustainable communities for learning, and to provide volunteering work experience and apprenticeship opportunities. The Youth Wellbeing Service has supported 89 young people, 13 new and 76 existing at Q1, and has delivered 526 one-to-one mentoring sessions in schools and in the community due to an increase in capacity. The Pastoral Support Plan portal has been successfully completed and a final review taking place over the summer, and the PSP portal will be rolled out to all schools in the new year. Employer pledge has been developed and will be taken forward in the next quarter via the Cardiff City Region Business Links project. This has involved key employers, schools and local colleges. And the work has commenced on a new Vale Skills partnership alongside Cardiff and Vale College. If there's any questions on Objective 2.
I think we'll, Councillor Hooper, did you want to come in?
Yeah, this is a general question, Chair. These look different to the papers that we had today ahead of the meeting. So I've got, what have we achieved? Objective 1, promoted our bi-monthly newsletters to the business industry with relevant updates from partners as the first point, and it's not the same. Am I missing something really?
Let me check whether the wrong one's been. Bear with me 1 second. Now, if I stop sharing, Chair, and I'll just check if the right ones. I had this open, and I'm hoping I haven't opened the wrong one. So bear with me 1 second. This was the only one open, but bear with me 1 second.
Just to clarify, just looking on the Q1 report that's on the website on Appendix A, Objective 1, what have we achieved, refers to the bi-monthly newsletters. Increased opportunities for stakeholders.
My apologies, I don't know how. Yeah, apologies. I've just gone down the list and I cut and paste one, and when I have somehow it's the wrong. What's opened is the wrong one. So I do apologise. I'll start again. And thank you, Councillor Hooper, for pointing that out. We've had a number of these on the go, I will say, because it was produced right at the last minute, and unfortunately, it looks like I've opened the wrong one, so I've confused myself. So I do apologise.
I was going to ask you, Marcus,
I will share the right one.
Do you have access to the right one, or do you want to continue without a presentation?
I have got it, so I will reshare. So apologies for that. Hopefully everyone can see that now.
Yeah, Marcus.
So yes, once again, apologies. I had two open on the screen. I've obviously shared the wrong one, so I do apologise for that. I will quickly flick through this because it's obviously you don't want to go through all the same things. So really quickly, we are promoting our bi-monthly newsletters to business and industry and Objective 1. We are introduced user-generated content, which has improved what we do in terms of marketing the Vale. We have undertaken work with all 4 town councils to begin the placemaking plans in the Vale, with the wider engagement to follow. Cowbridge is the most advanced town in this process, followed by Lantwit, Barry, and then Penarth. But all plans will be completed in this financial year. And we are expanding the shared working spaces and maximising our use of the property portfolio, working with Dunraven Estates in the redevelopment of the Heritage Coast Centre. Apologies, I don't know if anyone's got any questions on these news set here. Very welcome to ask them and I can answer them if I can. But do apologise, I opened the wrong one. No questions. I shall move on to Objective 2. We mentioned the skills partnership, already mentioned that, and that work is continuing with Cardiff and Vale College to pursue better links between economic development and facilitate links between employers and schools. We've approved multiple business grants and commercial improvement grants across the county. We've developed an employer pledge, which we've talked about, and we've launched the Cowbridge Town Centre Loan Scheme. Work has commenced also on the development of a partner to support the future use of the Docks Office as part of the Regeneration programme. Councillor Hooper, do you want to come in on any of that?
Yeah, just on that last point, Marcus, the strategy for the partner, is this assuming that everything's going well with the Making Waves project? Because that's what this is part of, isn't it? Particularly as we're the other funding has been put on hold. Is there any risk to any of this on that last point? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. The Levelling Up Fund, as it was known, obviously that has changed its name since, continues to be worked on. We have agreed the Memorandum of Understanding with UK Government. That hasn't been returned yet, but we are in a position where we are continuing to use the funding that was given to us to develop the project. So I think what our view would be, and the view that we're getting from civil servants, is that we have to continue with the work on the Barry Making Waves project. There is a finite deadline, as you'll be aware, for delivering it, and so that has to be. We have to try and meet that. I have to say, with the delays we've already received, it's unlikely we'll meet that deadline, but we would be looking to extend that with UK Government in due course, as other councils have done with their projects across the piece. So while there is obviously a suspension in respect of the long-term plan for towns work, we have continued with the work around levelling up and around the Barry Making Waves project. We haven't received the return memorandum of understanding from UK Government yet, but we weren't really expecting that. We were expecting that to come back in due course. And the funding we're using to actually pursue this work is funding that's already been given to us by UK Government to actually get to the point where we need to be with a memorandum of understanding both with UK Government and the heads of terms, which we will then be agreeing with them.
Thank you, Marcus, for clarifying that. Please do continue.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of supporting people at home in the community, we have worked with a public art consultant to deliver new public art and community garden at B. Happus Garden at Heritage Gate, Lantwit Major. Section 106 open space and community facility contributions continue to be used to provide new and enhanced public open space across the Vale. Reviewing existing planning contribution policies and related supplementary planning guidance as part of the local development plan. And Section 106 affordable housing contributions continue to be used to increase the number of affordable homes in the area. I don't know if there are any questions on that.
No, I see no hands, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. And then obviously in Objective 4, respect, enhance and enjoy our environment, the draft Vale Morgan Local Area Energy Plan has been approved by Cabinet. We have secured a £249,000 grant to improve woodlands at Porthcurry Country Park. We've installed interpretational panels at Celtic Way Park Roost to complement new tree, bulb and wildflower planting. And we have continued to raise awareness of the Eco4 Flex scheme through a variety of media events. Councillor Hooper, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this local area energy plan. Would that be coming to this committee at some point?
Marcus, are you able to respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, our aim would be to bring it to the Scrutiny Committee. It's a draft plan which we are still finalising. It's a plan that's being prepared by consultants for the council and the Cardiff Capital Region. So it's been funded by Cardiff Capital Region. But certainly that's something we do intend to do, is to bring the final version to the Scrutiny Committee so it can have a look through the work that's been done. Obviously, the local area energy plan focuses on, if you like, everything the council doesn't do largely to achieve net zero in the long term. So it looks at businesses and energy networks and everything else. So it's a bit of a what's the best description? I think it's a very functional document rather than a sort of a document that expresses views. But I think it's really important it does come to scrutiny, and we will bring it when the draft is completed. It has involved consultation with business, third sector and other partners to actually get to that point, because as you'll appreciate, as it's very much aimed at those other outside organisations in terms of delivery, it's something that does require their input. But absolutely, we'll surely bring the final version of the plan to scrutiny for it to view.
Thank you, Marcus. And it's a good opportunity just for me to remind committee that as chair of the committee, I sit on the Cardiff Capital Region Scrutiny Committee and always welcome any discussion or conversations about that, and any issues that you want me to consider raising within that process. Please do feel free to get in touch with me about that. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and again, I shall just really quickly go through areas for improvement. The first one is continuing to working with and for our communities. So we continue to meetings with staff to explore new ways of working and achieving the challenging savings targets. And we're developing and promoting training to ensure that principles of good placemaking are embedded across council services. If I suggest at the end of it, if anyone wants to come in at any point, perhaps if they put their hand up as I keep going rather than stopping, and then obviously we'll get through a little bit quicker. Please feel free to put your hand up at any point, and I'll try and stop and come back on those points. In terms of Objective 2, supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, a new agent has been appointed to market the waterfront business properties following pressure from the council. And I would add that we are aware that there are at least 2, possibly 3 new businesses looking to open at the waterfront, either late this year or early next year. So there has been some progress in terms of new properties moving into those empty properties at the waterfront. We've been using the Shared Prosperity Fund to fund business grants, which is now fully committed. However, the volume of applications was much higher than expected, so the scheme was oversubscribed, which has impacted on the time taken to process applications, and we have had to bring in additional resource to support the team who's doing that. In terms of Objective 3, supporting a people at home in their community, the popularity of new adaptations grants has put pressure on resources, resulting in longer waits for urgent adaptations, and the reshaping work to form a new team with social services has commenced in the summer with a view to transitioning at the end of the financial year. Bear with me 1 second. Apologies, my screen's changed without me. Oops. In terms of Objective 4, respecting, enhancing and enjoying our environment, we've commenced Section 106 contribution transport schemes, including pedestrian improvements near Sully Primary School, at Bontbine School, and a free travel service for the Ogmore to Lantwit bus, the 303 service, for a limited time. Speed of decisions regarding listed buildings has been affected by the removal of the delegation by the Welsh Historic Monuments organisation CADU, but work is underway to re-establish the delegation procedures to allow us to make quicker decisions. And funding for a dedicated post to support the delivery of green infrastructure strategy is currently under consideration, and a post-consultation strategy is now subject to Council's approval process. Emerging areas of development activity. In terms of working with and for our communities, we've worked collaboratively with ward members, town and community councils and other local council groups to identify priorities for Section 106 community spend. We've been progressing placemaking town plans. We've implemented approved governance structures to support delivery of key council projects and develop a pipeline of work via the new programme boards. And we continue the development of a more flexible approach to recruitment to address recruitment challenges. In terms of Objective 2, supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, the Barry Partnership has been constituted as required by the long-term plan for towns funding and has met on a number of occasions. And the partnership is developing a robust case for long-term investment under three themes. We are working collaboratively to deliver the Empty Property Management Support Programme, and we are working with Cardiff and Vale College, I think that is CVR Energy, on skills work at Aberthaw. That is that's Cardiff, and that is the Cardiff Capital Region Energy offshoot, and we've been working with them to develop skills work at the Aberthaw former power station. And finally, we're developing a formal approach to joint working with corporate joint committees. Objective 3, supporting people at home in their communities. We have a background paper being prepared to consider education implications for new development as part of the replacement local development plan. We're developing and monitoring a framework as part of the LDP to deliver against its objectives. And we're supporting the delivery of temporary accommodation through the planning process, including Eagleswell Road site applications at Carrickston House. Finally, Objective 4, respect, enhance and enjoy our environment. We're progressing work with parks, landscape and play colleagues to assist with the enhancement of existing new green infrastructure, public open space and play areas. And there's ongoing work with Spring Design, who have been commissioned to advise on a net zero homes policy for inclusion within the replacement local development plan. And we're also progressing the draft tree strategy to full adoption. Finally, emerging areas of concern. We're working with, in terms of Objective 1, working for and with our communities. There remains uncertainty over future UK government funding, as Councillor Hooper referred to earlier. We are attracting suitably skilled staff within the competitive market remains challenging, and we do have ongoing skill shortages, and of course cost pressures and other projects are becoming more challenging to deliver because of this. In terms of Objective 2, supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, we're looking to the viability of new developments is impacting on the amount of Section 106 contributions that are being received. They are actually going down, unfortunately, and of course that will affect how much we can support some of the projects which rely on Section 106 funding. One example is a developer going into administration while having not paid us all of the Section 106 funding. However, that development will not be able to recommence until the funding is paid. So there is a sort of a fail-safe to that. In terms of Objective 3, supporting people at home in their community, capacity does not currently match demands being seen, but capacity does not currently match the demands, but a new framework for contractors in terms of disabled facilities grants should speed things up across housing and regeneration. And the success of placemaking plans remains dependent on support from communities and town councils. And finally, Objective 4, respecting and enhancing the environment. Viability of new developments, as I said before, is impacting on developments. I actually think I've done that one already. Apologies. No, I haven't. It's apologies. Some of these repeating themselves. So viability of Section 106 contributions is affecting some of the money we're getting in. I've mentioned that. There are challenges to supporting the shift to a circular economy and maintaining the waste and recycling services in a competitive HGV driver market remains challenging. So apologies about that. Below that presentation, members will note are all the various actions and service plan performance indicators, which are largely green, I would add, in terms of the area of this scrutiny committee. But I did promise, and I'll stop sharing, sorry, screen. I did promise that I'd pick through the report to look where the areas are in respect of I think it's only 4. From what I can see in reading through, there are only 4 areas where there are red indicators. One is in respect of implementing moving traffic offences across the council, and that is actually a report on that is under preparation and is due to be reported in either Q2 or Q3. The next one is in delivering alternative sewage arrangements for Channel View, Marcross, and Croft John Penmark, and members will be aware that has been an issue, and that is awaiting a financial appraisal on funding. The third one is contributing to the development work of the Cardiff Capital Region and Transport for Wales on an interchange at Cogan, and that is held up basically by work undertaken by Cardiff Capital Region, who are developing a prioritisation matrix in terms of the regional transport plan. And then the final red item is in terms of delivering and embedding circular economy activities through a range of community and development projects. This action was to be delivered via external grant. However, changes to including the inability of the third sector partner agency to source suitable high street locations mean that funding couldn't be claimed, and the project is currently on hold. Some smaller local initiatives are underway to promote recycling and reuse. So apologies, a bit of a fly through there. What I've tried to do is bring out also those items that are red. As I said, there are only 4 out of all the other items that are associated with this group.
Thank you, Marcus. Councillor Prothero, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Marcus. As Ward Councillor for St Bride's, I just wanted to reiterate and speak on behalf of the residents at Channel View who have tried for many, many, many years to resolve their issue with the sewage, and I know that this is the second time we've had to tender for this, and I know that you are looking at the financials right now, but we really, really want a resolution for them and for those residents. So I just wanted to stress that, if that's okay. The next point, which could become a recommendation, is really, is it possible, and this is to do with sustainable economic development. You talked about the units at the waterfront for businesses to be going into, and that there was some interest. And I'm thinking kind of like in general terms where we have retail outlets, where we have those opportunities for businesses to go in, if we could be more flexible and innovative about the tenancy agreements, whether we could have shared tenancy agreements. So a unit could be a cafe in the day and possibly a restaurant in the night. So it would be cheaper for businesses if they're starting up. I don't know if this is something that we're already looking at, but if we could look at a possible flexible approach and those sort of joint tenancy agreements, so we can have, maximum use of our units, I think it would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Marcus, I wonder, is that something that's being considered in relation to the town centre renewal work that's happening? I'll bring you in a moment, Councillor Wilson, and we'll hear from Marcus on this first, if we may. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The units that report referred to are actually privately owned units. They're not owned by the council. They're the district centre units, which of course we required as part of the planning approval and the master planning for waterfront redevelopment, but are actually owned by the consortium of house builders. And so we've been applying pressure to the consortium to be as flexible as possible in terms of how they let those units, and to actually involve agents who, if I'm honest with you, know what they're doing, and approach it in a more in as effective way as possible. The agents they're currently using seem to have been extremely good at doing that. They have held on-site engagement days with businesses. They're also advising on financial offers which could help businesses go in there. And so certainly, as the question that's being asked by Councillor Prothero, I suspect, is in respect of council-owned properties and how we would deal with leases in those particular properties. And certainly we try to be as flexible as possible when they are council-owned properties. It can be a little difficult, but in terms of the types of properties we do have, and we do have a number on the island, for example, Barry Island, I know that we are flexible about how those are used with a particular the particular lessees. But in the main, the vast majority of our town centre properties are owned privately, and it's around us working with those private landowners and to ensure that they are as flexible as possible for tenants to let.
Thank you, Marcus. Has that addressed your question, Councillor Prothero, or did you want to come back on that? Yeah, I don't see your hand, so we'll assume that that's addressed your question, and I'll bring in the Cabinet member now, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, it was just the question that Councillor Prothero raised about Channel View. What I do, I have weekly meetings with the director, and I will bring that to his attention, and I will update you and also Councillor Stallard as well, your fellow board member, on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wilson. I mean, I understand the position that we're in, and I also have had regular updates, and you know, no criticism there at all. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the residents who've waited a very, very long time. One resident, 40 years, which obviously it's not on this particular council's watch, but it's a really important issue for us. So thank you for your
That's okay, no problem. No
intervening.
problem.
Thank you.
You're muted, Chair.
Muted, Chair.
Yeah, just to say one question from me, if I may, Marcus. Really good news to hear that we secured £249,000 to support the woodlands at Porthkerry. And I note that you highlighted the fact that the tree strategy is moving towards full adoption, and just wondering whether or not we have any timescales for that, because that's something that's been raised by committee a number of times. And I can see Miles wants to come in. Miles has answered this previously. Miles.
Sorry, Chair, I just want to take part in the meeting, really. Thank you very much for bringing me in. Yes, it's coming to this committee in October, Chair. So we have the outcomes of the consultation. So we wanted to have a good debate on it, because it's obviously a very important document before going back to Cabinet. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion on it in October.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And it's always good to have your involvement in committee, Miles. So thank you.
And apologies,
Marcus?
Chair, I got booted out then.
No, it's fine. It gave Miles an opportunity to comment, which is always welcome. So are there any final questions or comments in relation to this report? I don't see any hands, in which case I move that we note the report if committee is happy. Is somebody happy to second that? Councillor Hooper?
Yeah.
Happy to second. Many thanks. Councillor Hooper, thank you. So I'll move us on. Oh, just to say many thanks, Marcus and Miles, for giving us your time this evening, particularly Marcus for taking us through both of those reports. As ever, you're very welcome to stay for the final agenda items, which are the Finance Committee reports, but equally, if you want to leave to enjoy the rest of your evening, please feel free to do that. So I'll move us on now to agenda item 7. This is the closure of accounts for 2023-24, and this report will be presented by Gemma Jones, who's the operational manager for accountancy. So over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Sorry, I've turned my camera off. That's not looking great.
Yeah, I was just going to say you're breaking up.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can still hear me though. Okay, can you?
Gemma, you're breaking up.
Okay.
There's a bit of a delay, Gemma.
Mark, I have lost connection a couple of times, but I've come downstairs to be closer to my router. Would you like me to try leaving and rejoining to see if that helps?
If possible, Gemma, try that again, and if necessary, yeah, just rejoin without the camera then, if committee and the chair are happy, just have the audio.
Yes, please. So apologies, committee, please just bear with us while Gemma does that. Here we go, we're trying again. Hello, Gemma.
Hello, Chair. Is that any better?
I have to say the audio is still, the sound is still not very clear, but I suggest that we press ahead and let's see how we get on, because I know you've got, I think you're talking to the next 4 reports. Before you...
Oh, sorry, Chair. I was going to say, if you just bear with me one moment. I'll just go and try and reduce the internet usage in my house for a few minutes and see if that helps. So if committee wouldn't mind bearing with me for one moment, and then I'll rejoin. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Gemma. Just to check, Chair, I believe Councillor Hooper had his hand up briefly, so I don't know if he wanted to come in.
I'm assuming since your hand went down, Councillor Hooper.
I'm just expressing, I'm sure the rest of the committee are frustrated by this, but these are 4 really important documents that we're about to go through that we've not gone through for a while, our finance reports for a while, because we took the decision not to earlier on in the year, and it worries me if we don't give this proper consideration.
So just to clarify, there have been no financial reports that have not been considered by this committee. There was concern expressed about that at the point at which that suggestion was made, so that this committee has not missed any financial reports. And I think Gemma has just rejoined us. So, Councillor William, did you want to come in? Otherwise, I'm quite keen to get Gemma into the committee meeting so that she can start talking to us about the reports.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I just think this reiterates the importance of having actual present face-to-face meetings. The online stuff isn't working.
Well, I think we've had a very good online committee this evening, and let's see how we get on now with the next reports from Gemma. Thank you, Gemma.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you, and apologies. Thank you for bearing with me. So for the first report, the closure accounts report for the 23-24, I'm going to keep it quite brief, but I'm happy to take any questions from committee. So the accounts were completed. So the management accounts were completed substantially in May, but the council statement of accounts were completed by the 29th of June and were passed to Audit Wales on that date. And the external audit is underway. It's substantially underway in terms of and expected to complete in October. So this report sets out the kind of provisional outturn position for the council. And I think in terms of pressures, They're broadly as reported throughout the year, and the overall council position is set out in Appendix 1 of this report. And we saw continuation of those really significant social care pressures that we saw throughout the year, some significant pressures in school transport and ALN. And more specifically to this committee, some significant pressures around road maintenance and HGV drivers. We did have a larger than expected surplus in the policy budget, and that's largely due to collection of council tax historic arrears. So we had a £3.5 million surplus on council tax, and we also had some additional investment income and surpluses on internal borrowing, which are all obviously temporary situation, because as our reserves reduce, we will have less money to invest and less money to internally borrow. And that's an additional surplus over and above that was then used to set aside some funds to offset potential school deficits in 24-25. So there was 2 million set aside for that and 80,000 that went into the general fund. So in terms of the specific position for this committee, the neighbourhood services position is set out in Appendix 2 to this report, and highlights some of the favourable and adverse variances. We had a rates refund, and that significantly affected car parking sites. So there was just short of 300,000 relating to that. And we also had surpluses across construction schemes and public transport and enforcement income in year, as well as recycling income. And then spend against food recycling and special collections. But this was offset, as I said, most significantly by highways patching, but also by pressures against waste for additional salary costs for HGV drivers, and the rollout of commingling, which is felt very badly in the appendix, so apologies for that. There was also an overspend against the resort and street cleansing budget. And some other expense against community centres and Bellevue set-up costs and parks. There was also a drawdown from the ash dieback reserve to offset the costs of ash dieback in year, and some spend against play schemes in relation to youth wellbeing that had been set aside as part of the 22-23 outturn. In terms of savings, there are some savings that weren't delivered in year, and these have been taken forward to continue to be monitored in 24-25. In terms of the place budget, that's set out in Appendix 3 to this report, and the committee will note that there is some additional costs included in this report for the buyout of the lease relating to the Vale Enterprise Centre, and that includes costs associated with making that transaction. There are also some adjustments for provision for bad debts and additional costs associated with the workshops, and that's been offset by some income in relation to things like SPF grant income and some other sources of funding across the service. There's also some car parking income fees, and where that relates to country parks, that is passed into reserve to further invest in those country parks. In terms of the overall position of the council, we saw around £12.5 million.
Gemma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Chair.
Yeah, sorry, Gemma.
Gemma, can you hear us?
Yes, hello. Yes, I can.
Mark, are you able to mute?
I'm going to contact you, or you'll contact us separately now. We have spoken about separately. Bear with me.
Chair, can you hear me? Chair, can you hear me?
Right, Chair, I believe there's a bit of a lag going on. So I'm trying to get in touch to resolve that now, Chair.
In the
Okay.
meantime,
Sorry, Chancellor William, please don't interrupt me. I'm just trying to resolve this with the Democratic Services Officer.
it's not working.
Councillor William, this isn't helping. Thank you. So, Mark, if you and I could talk to each other. Thank you, Mark.
Chair.
Yeah, so Mark, this is clearly not working.
No.
Are we able to get hold of Gemma and explain that to her?
Yeah, we are working on that now, Chair. It's just because
Thank you.
she's in this meeting, it's difficult to get in touch then outside of the
Yes,
meeting.
of course. I
Please bear
appreciate
with us. Apologies for this committee.
Gemma, I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, so committee, what we're going to do is we're going to pause for 2 minutes. Please treat it as a comfort break. I'm hoping that you can hear me over Gemma. We're going to pause for 2 minutes. Please treat it as a comfort break, and then we're going to decide what we're going to do about the rest of the agenda. So please just bear with us while officers try and resolve the issue. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I've just spoken to Gemma now. We've talking about a few other fixes, for example, coming off VPN and just making sure the Teams is closed. Gemma, can you try your audio now, please? I believe Gemma's rejoining now, Chair. Bear with us.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, committee, for your patience.
Chair, just to let you know, Gemma's going to rejoin via new link. If there are still issues, then we possibly got another finance officer to come through and explain the reports, possibly Matt Bowmer. Okay, just to let you know and the committee know.
Just to say thank you again, committee, for bearing with us. As you can tell, officers are doing their best to try and ensure that we can take these important reports tonight. I'm really sorry that you've all been kept waiting, and we're going to give this just a few more minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, working on it now, Chair. Apologies again to committee. We, generally speaking, in terms of the meetings, we've not had this issue particularly. This seems to be quite a severe connection issue, so we are trying to resolve it as best we can.
Thank you, Mark. Can I just check if these reports are time sensitive for this committee?
I'll need to double check with Gemma and Matt, but hopefully we'll be able to get Matt on, if not Gemma. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you.
Hi, Gemma. Can we just check your audio and video? Your video's come across fine. Can we just check your audio, please?
Yeah. Hi, Mark. Is that any better?
Yeah, you're coming through. Doesn't seem to be any delay. Seems to be coming through pretty clear. Chair, you happy with that audio and video?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. And Gemma, we're going to need to start again with agenda item 7 because it was too difficult to understand what was said previously.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Just to make sure, I'll just check my colleague. If you're happy now and committee are happy that we restart the meeting, restart this part of the meeting and we come out of adjournment. Is that okay?
Yes. From my perspective, yes. Unless there are any objections, we're going to go ahead.
Okay. Amy, can I just check that you've restarted the live stream, please?
Absolutely, Mark. All fine.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks for your forbearance, committee.
So for the sake of the recording, welcome back to this evening's Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. Apologies for the delay, which was caused by a technical issue, which hopefully we've now resolved. And we are on agenda item 7, which is the closure of accounts for 23-24. And Gemma Jones, the operational manager for accountancy, has joined us to present this item. So over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for committee for bearing with me. In terms of the outturn position for 23-24, it is the provisional outturn. So the accounts were completed by the 29th of June, and they're with external audit, and that audit is ongoing and expected to be completed sometime towards the end of October. These accounts obviously set out the overall management account position for the council, and that's in Appendix 1 to this report. In Appendix 2 and 3, it sets out the specific position for the areas that are relevant to this scrutiny committee. So within neighbourhood services, we have those significant pressures around HGV drivers and road maintenance, and then offset in part by some surpluses in waste, in terms of income, but also there was a rates rebate in car parks, which obviously is a one-off benefit in year. In terms of the place report, there are a number of pressures across the service, and there was some additional income in respect of country parks, which is ring-fenced for further investment in country parks in future years. The overall position for the council had those key pressures across social services. We saw significant pressures there throughout the year, pressures across ALN and school transport continuing. They were offset by a higher than expected surplus within both the policy budget and the council tax budget. So we had a £3.5 million surplus in council tax in year. Partly because of these significant overspends, we had quite a significant drawdown from reserves to fund the revenue budget in year. So around £12.5 million to fund the general fund revenue budget, 34 million reduction in reserves in year. So a reduction in reserves from 110 million to 76 million. And as we're all aware, those pressures are continuing into 24-25, as we'll be reporting in the Q1 monitoring. Those were the key points I was going to draw out in the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Are there any questions on the report from anyone, please? No, I see no hands, in which case I move that we note the report, and can I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor William. And we move on now to agenda item 8. This is the capital closure of accounts for 23-24, and Gemma is staying with us to present this report as well. So over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the capital closure accounts, I suppose a similar position really. So these are obviously also with the auditor at the moment for the audit. So this is the provisional position. So across the programme, the outturn was 88.6 million, and specifically to this scrutiny committee, 14.3 million against a programme of 18.6 million. The report highlights some key achievements in the capital space in year, and one scheme that's highlighted is the Local Nature Partnership grant within the report. There was a variance of 4.3 million relevant to this committee, and some of those key variances are in respect of schemes such as coast protection, Dinas Powys flood resilience, Eastern Shelter and Barry Island promenade refresh, and that's largely in respect to the ANPR schemes. There's also some slippage relating to ANPR at country parks, a number of Section 106 schemes with notable slippage, and some slippage against the 5 Mile Lane scheme. To allow those schemes where there are slippage to progress in 24-25, that's been approved via emergency powers, and the revised 24-25 programme is set out in appendix to this report. Those are the key points I was going to draw out in this report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for taking us through that, Gemma. Any questions from anyone, please? No, I see no hands. So just to remind committee that we're asked to note the year-end capital position for financial year 23-24, note the additional scheme budgets are set out in Appendix 1 of the report, note the summary position of the changes in the capital programme, and note the emergency power that's been approved in respect of the slippage, again, as set out in Appendix 3. Are committee happy to note those recommendations?
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you, Councillor William. And we move on then to agenda item 9. This is the Q1 Revenue Monitoring Report for 24-25. Over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So Q1 revenue monitoring position. So this takes the position to the end of June in 2024, and obviously very early in the financial year. But we do have a continuation of some of those really significant pressures. So we are projecting some unplanned use of reserves to offset pressures in social care, particularly in respect of children's services, but there's also a significant overspend in adults and in relation to the council-run care homes. There are also some pressures being reported in education in respect of additional learning needs pressures, and within, more specifically to this Scrutiny Committee, some continuation of those significant pressures in terms of road maintenance, so a lot of pothole costs, and also in respect of HGV drivers. We also have pressures across the council regarding the gap between the pay award that we estimated for 24-25, and obviously whilst pay negotiations remain ongoing, there is a risk, therefore, that pay award will be above the provision that we've made in the budget. Another thing that's impacting the position in 24-25, although it's very early days in terms of the monitoring position, are the significant number of savings lines that have been set out as part of the 24-25 budget. So we've got £7.676 million of savings for 24-25, and whilst progress is encouraging against some of those savings lines, obviously it's clear that those savings will not be achieved in full, and there's some real disparity in terms of achievement of those savings. Provision was made as part of the 24-25 budget for shortfall against savings, because we've noted that with savings programmes of this size, we often don't achieve them in full, and there's always a lag in terms of achieving those savings. And this report includes allocation of that £1 million reserve towards offsetting the shortfall against savings in year. There is still a significant unplanned use of reserves being reported as part of this report. So we have just over 13.6 million planned use of reserves, albeit 4 million is in relation to schools. As well as looking at the 24-25 savings position, we obviously also continue to keep under review the 23-24 savings that weren't achieved, and they're set out in the appendix to this report. Those were the key points I was going to draw out on this report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Are there any questions from anyone, please, in relation to this report? Councillor Hooper.
It's more of a comment rather than a question, Chair. It just feels as though we are, we've got the same issues that we had at the back end of last year coming to hit us again this year. Savings not being achieved, the same pressures that were there. It concerns me a little bit that we didn't pick some of these up and didn't adequately put enough budgetary space for them, which now feels that they're hitting us. And if we're at 13 million in unplanned use of reserves now, that surely is something that we're going to have to consider that's likely to grow towards the back end of the year as well. So I feel like this report is a very, very the start of a red flag moment for this council. I'd welcome views if there's any cabinet members on the call, maybe they want to talk to this, because I think this is a real issue. We now have obviously UK Labour government, Welsh Labour government, and Welsh Labour controlled Vale Council, so there's nowhere to hide anymore. So I'd welcome some views on where this is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Wilson, thank you for joining us. Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to respond. I mean, obviously, in my area, I mean, obviously, you've got pressures in terms of things like HGV bike vehicles. But I know if we didn't pay the increase, we would have some real issues in recruiting those drivers and using them. And obviously, people rely very much on them for refuse and other services. And then we are in a competitive climate with the private sector in these areas as well. So it's not just as simple saying don't give these pay increases. We also did a very cost-effective service. I mean, I know in the previous report, it worked out at £47 for refuse and recycling for every resident in the Vale Glamorgan. That is phenomenally cheap. I don't think the private sector could ever compete with that. To be honest, that's less than £1 a week. Obviously, other areas do relate to things like social services and education, where obviously they're the major big spending areas. I think our area contributes, when we're talking about refuse and roads, roughly about 7% of the entire budget. But if you compare that with the sums in social services and education, these are the real big hitters in terms of expenditure, and this is obviously not part of this Scrutiny Committee's remit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Gemma, did you want to come back in on that point? Thank you.
Yes, please, Chair. Just to make some commentary and not to understate the seriousness of the Council's financial position, because obviously it's very challenging times and the 25-26 budget will absolutely pose more challenges. I think there was additional capital funding set aside for road resurfacing as part of the 24-25 budget. Obviously not sufficient, I think the service is now estimating that to keep the roads in a steady state, they'd need circa £5 million of resurfacing. So I think we have around £2 million in the programme. So obviously that's a significant shortfall. In terms of pressures in areas such as social services, they do tend to be reported relatively prudently. So I think we tend to have a quite full year projection in terms of these figures. So in terms of allaying committee's concerns about these pressures in social services significantly ramping up as we progress through the year, we tend to see that they peak in the autumn and then drop back slightly, although that trend has been less marked in the last couple of years. And in terms of the schools pressures, obviously we continue to work very closely with schools to try and reduce those deficits and make sure that schools are setting balanced or recovery budgets. And there are a number of proposals within the report and steps that the council are taking to try and mitigate those overspends in year. And obviously the council is required to set a sustainable balanced budget 25-26, and that will need to be picked up as part of the budget setting that committee will be cited on in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Gemma. I see no hands, so I'm assuming that there are no more questions. So just to bring us back to the recommendations, which are that the position with regard to the authority's 24-25 revenue budget be noted, and that members note the violence included as part of the report. If committee are happy, I move those recommendations. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Iannucci Williams, thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Many thanks. So we move on to the final report of the evening. This is the Capital Monitoring Report for the period 1st of April to the 30th of June. And again, Gemma will present this. So over to you, Gemma. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So again, this is the capital position to the 30th of June. Very, very early in the year in terms of capital spend for the first quarter. So capital spend is very low on this report. And typically we see that increase as we progress through the year, but certainly steps up in September as schemes have been undertaken over the summer and start to hit the ledger. Projected outturn for this Scrutiny Committee of 23 million. And there are 4 delegated authority requests that are relevant to this Scrutiny Committee. So one in respect of an SPF grant funded scheme. and 3 schemes that are Section 106 funded, and they're set out within the report. The report also highlights additional grant funding of 3.7 million for transport, that's been included in the 24-25 capital programme. So we have the capital programme included in full in Appendix 1, and then Appendix 2 sets out the summary position with slippage required, and there isn't any slippage relevant to the Scrutiny Committee. Happy to take any questions on this report.
Many thanks, Gemma. Any questions from anyone? No, I see no hands, so we will move to the recommendations. 3 recommendations before us this evening, committee. The progress made on delivering the 24-25 capital programme within the remit of the committee be noted in the attached Appendix 1. And then I think there's an amendment to the next recommendation. This says that the use of delegated authority within the remit of this committee, as summarised in paragraph 2.4 and detailed in the report at various paragraphs, be noted. And the only amendment to this recommendation is that it includes a reference to paragraph 2.26, and that delegation is actually under homes and safer communities and not environment and regeneration. Everything else remains the same. And finally, that the use of emergency powers within the remit of the committee as detailed in Appendix 1 are noted. And if committee is happy, I move those recommendations. And can I have a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Councillor Inucci Williams, did you want to come in?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So that concludes our business for this evening, committee. Sincere thanks for your patience in bearing with us through those final challenges. Particular thanks to Gemma for finding a way of reconnecting with us to take us through those critical reports. We're very grateful to you and to officers for finding a solution to that. So it just remains for me to remind everyone that our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, the 22nd of October at 6 o'clock. And I look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you very much. Good night.